So coming into Stitch vs. Rocket, it was not exactly a fun waiting period. Strangely enough, people got pretty heated and to some extent rather toxic and obnoxious over the matchup. The Rocket side would constantly make bad arguments and show a complete lack of evidence for their claims, while the Stitch side would constantly rag on that lack of evidence and mock people who didn't understand the scans they were posting out of a genuine lack of context. Both sides went back and forth in a very unfun battle that sort of soured the experience. So despite being a vehement Stitch supporter and also casual Rocket enjoyer, I was kind of okay with either side being shut up by one of them dying. The episode did, however, more or less make it worth it. Starting with the analysis, I think the difference in render quality from this good, nice Stitch render to this ugly, poorly cropped out, completely unfeathered and jagged Rocket render says a lot about how they compare. Stitch's is good, though there's some weirdness. They call out Stitch as bulletproof while showing him being plasma proof. The whole Dark End section seems really weird as they bring up Dark End as impressive and beating up several Stitch clones, but instead of showing that, they just play one extended sequence of Stitch beating his ass. And instead of showing the dislodging of the city-sized space station that they mentioned, they just cut off right before that scene. On the plus side, however, Deathbell managed to pull out what I'd almost consider an actually funny cutaway gag. I know, shocking. With Wiz's attempt at an ex-wife joke immediately getting rejected by Boomstick, it wasn't laugh out loud funny at that point, but I thought it was an amusing spin on it. Dummy getting into ribbing Wiz also feels less like he actually gives a damn and more like he just wanted to torment Wiz too. If it was just that, I call it a cutaway gag by definition, but the fact that Wiz tries to get back into it in an attempt to coax Boomstick in, and he just does not reciprocate, is what ended up turning this from a predictable cutaway gag to a predictable cutaway gag that got a chuckle out of me. Good stuff! I kinda wish the next line after wasn't immediately Boomstick coming back, but I'll live. I don't necessarily think it covers Stitch's story perfectly, or even all that well, it kinda just drops it pretty early on. At the very least, I would've liked if it ended off on Leroy and Stitch with the necklace, you know, meaning of it, and ending on the note of him having found a new Ohana instead of that being in the middle. But, yeah, the ending is okay, it's just not thematically heartwarming like I would've expected. It's not a big deal, it's just something I would've liked more. Rockets was... Well, I'm gonna be real, I'm not a big fan of this editing. I don't hate it at all, but it's definitely not as clean and slick as normal. A lot of the comic panels feel like they're wobbling too much or zoomed in oddly so that the image quality is greatly lost, and they tend to go by super fast, which isn't ideal. Instead of feeling like the comic pages are coming to life or seamlessly gliding by as little tidbits of information, they feel like they're just zipping by oddly, and I'm really not a fan. Hell, normally we get specifically cut out relevant panels and quotes and just show those, but this time was just a bunch of full-on page spreads zoomed in, which didn't work for me. Not to say that they never cut portions out of the pages, because I know some chuckle fuck will think that's what I mean. They do at points, but generally it wasn't done to the same extent that we're used to. Also, yeah, I don't think his story was covered too amazingly either. They just sort of bring it up at the start and at the end, and that's it. Normally I'm fine with this, but it doesn't have any poignancy, which I'm used to with Deathbell. They have a standard, you know. What is up to standard though? The animation. Starting with the visuals, they're quite nice. The effects look great as always, as is the background. Setting the stage of the fight on Space Hawaii is brilliant, and I like how it looks. Nothing sticks out as looking too odd, except the Monado, which to me just looks a little bit out of place, and not just because it's 3D, because I think the whole environment is. It's just much more highly detailed in its style than everything else. The sprites, meanwhile, I like. I think Rockets is really great and expressive here, and Stitch also looks good. Maybe Stitch's proportions are a little off. I guess he's a bit too lean and not round enough in places. He definitely seems a little bit too tall, or maybe a bit too skinny, but it's not a deal breaker and it doesn't distract when it's in motion. Also, to the fuckers who said I was nitpicking by bringing up the poses last episode, despite posing being an essential part of animation when you're working on limited frames for each action as a way to get across motion, character, and intention, within the short time a viewer will see things, making key poses incredibly important, which anybody who knows anything about animation would know, and if they think it's a nitpick they have no fucking clue what they're talking about. This episode doesn't have any of those issues. There's still a bit of the completely side-on posing I'm not a fan of, but it generally keeps things to a proper dynamic look on actual angles that look good. And all the front-facing ones actually feel like they fit because of the camera angle chosen. It works. The fight just looks great, and I quite like most of the writing. It's not without its oddities, but this is an overall solid episode. The setup and narrative of the animation works for me. While episodes can often have concessions for character writing, this time instead the concession is the lead into events. The characters are in character. What is kind of wishy-washy is how exactly is Stitch here, and how is he getting launched out of the volcano? But who cares, that's not important. What is important is that Stitch crashed into the Monado and blew it up, and Rocket isn't happy. We don't need to know what came before that, we don't need to necessarily know what came after the fight either. We just need to know that setup. I'm happy with this. It's enough to make Rocket start shooting, which feels pretty on brand for him, and Stitch doesn't question it and starts fighting back, which I also consider pretty on brand. It's only after Rocket fucks up Stitch's necklace, which I do have to question how it got hit, landed, and then disintegrated, like was Rocket firing a delayed time blast, that Stitch starts getting into it, and he begins really fucking Rocket up. Then Rocket gets the upper hand back by comboing all his guns into a nuke, only for Stitch to just be fine and use a chunk of the Monado to come back. Then it leads to the ending, which makes the fight feel really short, and it can't help but feel maybe a bit too short as well, honestly. It feels like more could have been done. It's not a big deal to me, but I could definitely understand if some people just did not like how short it felt. It would be a case of, I agree, it does feel too short, but it's not a deal breaker for me. The whole ending seems pretty cool for the most part, I'll come back to this. With Rocket firing his big fuck off weapon and having used his shield to keep Stitch in place so he'd be able to hit him with it, and Stitch survives and shows off his own genius by using literal scraps and broken garbage on the seafloor to create a controllable rocket bayonet to impale his enemy, using the gun that Rocket literally threw away in favor of his big gun. That's pretty good. It's all pretty great and goes a long way to making this fight feel like a good deal of thought was put in. The destruction of the Monado early on plays a big part of not only Stitch getting out to sea, but also I think him getting the win. Rocket's satellite that's set up just as a way for him to get a big gun actually ends up playing a factor in his death, and Rocket being here before Stitch was also makes his setup gun emplacements feel believable and not something you have to brain yourself to accept. Hell, did Stitch only get his power up by using the fuel source of that missile he caught? I guess this can be considered a criticism because it's not super clear to me whether this is a cool thing or a dumb thing. Because either it's cool because he caught it and powered up from the missile, or he caught it and then it just vanishes and isn't addressed again, which is dumb. The episode doesn't make it super clear, but it's not a big deal because I got the impression he powered up from it. I have heard people say that Rocket dominated this whole fight until he died, which I can't really agree with. He dominated a portion, but in the opening gunfight, while he is outdoing Stitch's gun, Stitch also has no problem putting Rocket on the back foot, and then dominating him in the melee segment. Maybe it just felt more like Rocket dominated because they put way more time into the portion where he was winning. Because one issue with this fight is really that the few times Rocket gets hit, it looks pretty bad. Rocket's really janky and awkward getting hit by the ball Stitch throughout him animation looks kinda crappy, and the melee portion looks, well, a little shit. Like, it's stiff, it's slow, it's just awkward. The following Season 7 smear spin was kind of unnatural, it really was not great. Oh, and Stitch clearly doesn't shove his own feet into his mouth the spin dash, 0 out of 10 episode. I feel like there's got to be like 7 people who've already made that joke, so that's not even that funny, is it? Of course it's not funny, I'm the one who made the joke. Meanwhile, when Rocket's dominating, we get this really nice hand-drawn bit, and 2 just really funny shots. One of Stitch flailing about as he's on fire and running in a panic, and one of Rocket vibing calmly and smugly while letting his guns go off. Rocket winning really got a lot more attention to it than when Stitch was winning. And I can forgive Stitch being a bit dumb in this immediate charge at Rocket without noticing the missile, because he's clearly a bit pissed about the whole explosion situation he just got hit with. Though it's not like Stitch doesn't immediately take back the baseball with his super scream combined with his iconic cackle stealing the show. And then he says something so vulgar that Rocket decides to burst out the biggest fuckest office gun he can. Also, using Rocket's super intense hearing to be able to actually make out what Stitch is saying from that far away is cool. I'm not sure if I care for Stitch being a brainlet and just wailing on Rocket's shield instead of just going around it, which he could just by, because he's clearly able to, stand on it. If he was actually succeeding in breaking it with each hit like there was cracks, then it'd be okay. I could see him just deciding to go through it with brute force instead of going around it, but it's not a huge deal. Also, Rocket is clearly holding an edit of the iconic Iron Man proton cannon, so him calling it his Thanos Buster, I want to imagine might be a reference to that because that's how Tony names things? I mean, if so, that's fun, and if not, then, well, it's a fun coincidence. Now, the rest of this sequence I'm not too hot on. Rocket flies straight up while Stitch was directly in front of him, but then fires diagonally downward instead of straight downwards. And Stitch suddenly is in his line of fire and also didn't try to stop him at all, even though Stitch should be directly beneath him or already in the water with nothing to stand on. In fact, he's so close to the water that he wouldn't have been falling by the time Rocket fired, he would have already been in the water and sinking. Then, instead of seeing the blast hit Stitch, we immediately cut from Rocket firing it to Stitch being in the middle of taking the hit. It's kind of weird writing-wise. So they say in the conclusion that Stitch could not survive this weapon explicitly, but then they have him survive it, and then after that, he wins. Despite them making this debate about who gets their winning hit off first and about speed. Now, this is not a case of me saying, well, the fight doesn't exactly perfectly match their research. Why didn't Stitch just blitz and instantly one-shot? What an episode. That is so bad. I'm also a Black Clover fan suddenly. But rather, Death Battle tends to be better at this sort of thing. For some examples, in Season 8 they say that Danny is faster and more skilled than Poe, but Poe is more unorthodox and creative and physically stronger. So we have Danny using speed and skill to get past the whooshy finger hold until Poe does something weird and Danny is not strong enough to break out of his hold. Season 7, they make a big deal about how Bucky's arm is stronger than Jason's helmet. So not only does Winter Soldier's arm survive things that damage Red Hood's helmet, but it's also the only thing he uses in the fight that completely overpowers the Hood. Season 6, the Mega Man Battle Royale literally has a black hole collision that represents the different power levels of the characters. Volnut dies, Classic dies or puts up a fight, X is obliterated but regenerates, Star Force is badly damaged but survives without needing to regenerate, and EXE is almost completely unfazed. And there are other examples across the series. Usually, episodes represent the research, just not to the degree where it ruins the fight. If one character is massively more powerful, usually they'll only show it at the end when they overpower the other, instead of them just overall stomping, you know? Even an episode as shonky as Sanji vs Rock Lee managed to get this across with the only hit Rock Lee lands in 8th Gate completely obliterating Sanji's leg. Though that episode did fuck it up immediately by having Sanji just flat out overpower Rock's 8th Gate form, but whatever. Part of me feels like this could have been alleviated if Rocket had jumped backwards to catch his gun, that way Stitch is diagonally downwards. We see Stitch still standing on the shield preparing himself for the gun to hit him, only to then jump at the last moment. Then, instead of getting his entirety hit by it, it just grazes him and obliterates a chunk of him. Instead of just randomly destroying the bits on his back that are not getting hit and his lower arms, but not his upper ones and nothing else. It's not like this is an attempt at a fake out, it's blatantly obvious Stitch is going to win once he hits the water and you can see he's still alive. I guess another option I just thought of is like, when Rocket drops the shield, Stitch falls into the water and starts drowning, and that's when Rocket picks up the gun and fires it into the water, so it seems like Rocket's going to win by exploiting Stitch's water weakness, but instead, because Stitch was underwater, Rocket had a harder time aiming and didn't quite hit him right. You could go with that as well. I just came up with that on the fly. I still like the kill overall, at least what comes afterwards with Stitch's intelligence, flying up and stabbing Rocket, and then showing his intelligence again by biting the thing that he's been watching Rocket use to call his weapons the whole time so Rocket can't escape. Rocket flies into and explodes in his station that was set up earlier, and is that a reference to Stitch throwing Dark End into space? That might be a bit of a stretch. I might be talking at my ass there. This whole area is great, I just think the Thanos Buster shot could have used some extra work to feel more in line with the conclusion, and also just generally feel more natural. Good synergy between the animation and conclusion is something I not only expect from Death Battle, but also enjoy seeing. And again, I feel like there are people who are going to not understand what I mean by that, and think that I expect the animation to be exactly as the conclusion said it. But we can see what I mean in every other episode this season so far. Ant-Man vs. Adam came down to how Hank can keep his distance and devise a plan, use his massive army of ants, and can destroy the bio belt to bring Raymond into overspace where he can then win. That's exactly what he does in the fight. He keeps his distance, he uses his ants to destroy the bio belt and also get inside Raymond, and he takes him to overspace so he cannot think straight to come up with a counter to the ants inside him. Even Adam overpowering him in their tiny forms comes into play in the fight. That is synergy between the conclusion and the animation, even if it's not exactly accurate to them giving Adam star level power and Hank universe level power. Skyrim vs Dark Souls comes down to how Skyrim is significantly more powerful and has unlimited magic, even though Dark Souls can use the Vow of Silence and tank Dawnbreaker. So, Liam completely tanks Dawnbreaker and climbs through it, and when Dark Souls attempts the Vow of Silence, it only briefly lets him take a proper upper hand, whereas Skyrim wins through the sheer power of his unrelenting force destroying the first flame. He's also a lot more liberal with his usage of magic as he can get away with it. Again, it pretty accurately represents the conclusion. Killua vs Misaka came down to Misaka having a much higher electrical power output and greater smarts, even though Killua was physically stronger. In the animation, Killua ends up winning any encounter that's purely physical, while having to dodge her lightning after she gets serious because he realizes that he cannot take it. It ends with Misaka's superior smarts allowing Killua to take out her kaiju, just so she can bait him into opening himself up against her clone, while he's in midair so he has no surface to use to propel himself to dodge, while also using her clone to trap him so that he cannot do anything to escape while she lines up a winning shot with her higher electrical power output that would kill Killua. Again, it accurately represents the idea of the research, if not necessarily the exact numbers. This episode though doesn't satisfy that at all, which is a shame. Not even them saying Rocket needed to just slip up once to give Stitch the chance, because he didn't slip up. He planned it perfectly and got his win-con in amazingly, it just did not work. This animation is what you'd use if Stitch could just overpower or survive his win-con more than often than not. Again, it's not a deal breaker, but it is a shame when the rest of the season has been pretty good at representing the research. At the very least, this probably has my favorite voice work of the season, which isn't saying much. Hank Pym sounded like Bruce Campbell, Raymond barely said anything, Liam just gets one thing and the delivery is a bit wonky, and Both Killua and Misaka were so middle of the road that I forgot to verbally mention them. This time, however, Jeff Shine, the voice of Captain America in the Avengers video game, if it's the same one as the one who shows up on IMDb, does a pretty good job as Rocket, sounding pretty annoyed when he needs to, but sadly not really getting to show off too much of Rocket having fun and being cocky, which I would have inevitably liked a bit more. Delta Angle Sorrel, on the other hand, does a pretty good job as Stitch. Though again, disappointing lines, because aside from the great "your mother's so fat they call her Space Pro Panda" line, and the of course necessary "Nala Quister" line, he doesn't get to say a whole lot in this fight. Hell, he says nothing in English at all, and the only intelligible thing he says in the fight is aloha. When it comes to the track, Jailhouse Rocket is not only a 10 out of 10 name, but also a pretty fun track in the fight. I haven't gotten around to listen to it on its own, but I imagine it's pretty fun with the Elvis vibes, which also plays pretty well into how the Guardians of the Galaxy films have this sort of musical choice a lot of the time. Not exactly Elvis, but you know, the vibe. Also, yeah, Ice Cream Guy, if I didn't mention him, people would be unhappy. He's fucking dead. And that leading to Ringmaster's double KO instead of a normal KO is an amazingly fun touch. The conclusion itself is whatever though. They say Rocket's guns could kill people stronger than Stitch, and then later say that Rocket's tactical mind could do nothing but hold Stitch back and not steal the deal. Is there any reason he couldn't steal the deal with the fuck-off guns they mentioned he has multiple of in the analysis? Like, okay, yes, I agree with the results, Stitch is too fast. Fair enough, but the line about Rocket's tactical mind only being able to hold Stitch back is a bit weird. But then Stitch busts in with a bunch of turkeys and announces himself as the winner as payoff to the Deadpool name drop earlier, which is a fun joke to end the episode on. Oh, and next time is Darth Vader versus Obito Uchiha. I don't care. I'm not upset it isn't Darth Vader versus Artoria, and I don't need that to be all people bring up in relation to it with me. I get it, guys. You don't like it as much as I used to before it got ruined by everyone being toxic cunts about it, instead of just respectfully disagreeing the way most people would. I don't care. I didn't want Darth Vader back for a while. I don't want Artoria in Death Battle. I've already been hit with multiple jokes about it and the matchup in the one day it's been between me watching the episode and me recording this review, you know? I've already had my fill of the unfunny haha it's not Vader Artoria jokes. I don't give a shit. I mean, I give a shit that I'm getting hit with the jokes because it just annoys me. I don't give a shit about the fact that it's not that matchup. I don't care about the matchup. I like Darth Vader. Obito is whatever. I've got nothing but negative feelings towards the matchup right now, and I hope that can change when I record the prediction at least. Aside from the huge blemish of the next time, which I cannot reasonably blame this episode for, Stitch vs. Rocket doesn't have any major standout problems. I don't like how it doesn't represent the research the way other episodes in its own season have. There are a few janky and bad looking segments in the fight, the editing in Rocket's analysis and the conclusion aren't great. But on the flip side, I like Stitch's analysis, they managed to pull off a good cutaway gag, the fight is overall fun if short, with good progression, funny moments and visually looks great, the track is really fitting and has a fun vibe, and my boy Stitch clutched a win. The good vastly outweighs the bad. Easily my second favourite, it's not even close this season. And I mean in terms of it's not even as close to as good as Chosen Born, but also Misaka Lua and Anthem aren't nearly as good as this one. It's a fun episode that I can enjoy rewatching over and over. I'm going to get tired of it eventually though, because it is short and not a lot happens in it, so it might not have the same lasting power as I would have liked. Well, there goes that review. I hope you guys like that one. God, I have no idea when this is coming out. YouTube cannot decide if it wants to listen to my, telling them what guidelines my video does and doesn't follow for monetization. That's the thing you gotta do. It's like, sometimes they'll be like, okay, yeah, I will believe you and will monetize the video. And other times they'll go, sod off, and you gotta do a review and wait like 5 fucking hours. Hours? I wish it was 5 hours. Goddamn days for us to do anything about it at a minimum. And it's like, But hey, the review's out by now at least. I have no idea when, as I said. And I hope you guys liked it. Very interesting seeing the reactions to my last review, which, you know, I still compliment the episode. I still like Killua vs. Misaka. It's like number 3. I'd like it's above Ant-Man vs. Adam for me, but below this and the last episode. Not the last episode. The last episode is Killua, but below Dragonborn Undead and this episode. It's not that I dislike it. I don't dislike it at all. I just had things that I didn't like about it that made it worse for me than it was for some others. But, you know, people get offended if you don't have literally the same opinion as them. And this is one time where people didn't want to fall into the hive mind of my thoughts, which, I mean, I guess I'm not complaining. Because you know, it means people are actually making their own opinions. I just wish they weren't so dense as to be like, oh, you complained about the posing, that's a nitpick. It was like, you don't know anything about sprite animation. Making sure those poses are readable and like clear is a very important part, because like usually sprite fights, the sprites only be on screen for a short amount of time, so you gotta make sure you get the posing correct to get that impression of what's going on. It's very important. And most episodes of Death Battle understand that, so when the episodes come out where that's a problem, it's rare, you know, and it's worth calling out. As just like with episodes that are exceptionally good at it are also worth pointing out. It's just usually they fall into like a decent middle ground. Like Ant-Man Atom had a lot of really bad poses, but also plenty of really good poses, so it was kind of like in like middle of the road there. That's beside the point. I don't give a shit about the next time. I don't care about Vader Obito. You know, you guys tell me what you think about this episode and the next time down below, preferably when it comes to the next time. Talk about what you like about the matchup and not saying stupid things, because I don't need to hear them. Well, I guess read them. I guess I might just not read the comments this time. I mean, plenty of times I don't, because they're just really aggravating. But, you know, I do like to read the comments and see what people think, because in the end, everyone is allowed to have their opinion, and I'm happy for people to share. So did you agree with me on the episode? Did you disagree? I know one of my mates does not agree, and he's not a big fan of this matchup. Or not the matchup, the episode. I don't know if it's a matchup, he's not a big fan of the episode. And that's fine, you know, I'm not complaining. He has the right to his opinion as well. I do not think there will be a Biff-Weed review for this episode, if you're wondering. And I don't know how he feels about it. Maybe he likes it, maybe he doesn't. But hey, chances are he's watching this right now and he's like, oh god, I'm speaking in Welsh and I gotta think, you could have just asked me what I thought. That's what he sounds like now. I've decided. You know what, maybe he should just never watch this review. He's gonna watch it and I'm gonna look like a real fucking bellend. But hey, that's me, I always look like that. And yeah, thank you to my patrons going by on screen. Let me embarrass myself, because they have access to my Patreon-only Discord, and they can make me say really stupid things. And you know, one of these days I'm gonna learn to just say, no, and not do that. So, what do they have? What do you mean this experiment cannot defeat Vegeta? What are you, this is ridiculous! Vegeta cannot beat anything, this would absolutely destroy. No. Goku died to laser. Even weak experiment better than laser. These would absolutely destroy Dragon Ball. Zeno little. This guy lift 10,000 times his weight, way more than Zeno could lift. He way better. You do not understand anything you're doing. You are wanking Dragon Ball. That was really bad. I don't know what to do. Make an Angry Bird noise. I guess that's one. Polar bears are fucking awesome. I love polar bears. Polar bears are my favorite type of bear. I also never want to meet one. Sing the other. That's what I think. I'm not gonna redub the High Evolutionary Students. I've seen the movie once. You expect me to remember them? Well, I died on the shit of it. Don't give a crap. You ain't gonna have the badass battle webs that I have. I got 1 for your monkey, 2 for your clothes, 3 for your family, and 4 for your nose. You better swear talking about them ABCs, cause all you wanna do is teach kids the birds and the bees. This is the big time Jacko No dress rehearsal. I'll let you up like your hair in a Pepsi commercial. Well, I can tell you're angry, but I can't comprehend it. I stole from black culture. Why are you offended? Your daddy Beagle records out of you like alchemy. Don't make me spank you and dangle your ass over a balcony. I remember that whole verse off by heart. I love it. Why'd Huan swear in the video? He swears all the fucking time. Do you want to hear Huan swearing? Like half my fucking videos that he's in. All of them, basically. You all see the new Galaxy Grudge match yet? I actually haven't. I haven't watched Galaxy Grudge match in a while because I've just been swamped. I barely have time to watch Biffweed's videos, and I try to make an effort to watch all of the ones I can to support his... Yeah, go support Biffweed, and I don't mean his like Death Battle reviews, because plenty of you probably already watched them. Go watch his stuff that's not the Death Battle reviews. I have to be careful there, because if I said not Death Battle reviews, it would imply he was reviewed, not Death Battle. No, go watch his non-versus videos, like his Mario Kart ones. Go do it. Do it now! Like, do it after this video, you fuckers! And I guess while you're at it, also go watch Galaxy Grudge Match 2, yeah? This episode of Death Battle is sponsored by Not Death Battle, the Not Death Battle show where your not favorite characters fight not to the death, hosted by Not Wiz and Not Boomstick. Overall, this fight was a blast. Stitch rocketed it, and Rocket had me in stitches. I don't know why, but whenever I hear overall, in a versus context, my first thought is animation rewind. It's a rewind coded word. That's a sentence that I have said now and I can't take it back. You know, for some reason I've got just like this image in my head right now of like Biffweed sees that I've notified people to give me stuff, and then he and like all of his buddies are like together in like a conference trying to figure out what is the least funny thing they could, like, trying to concoct the exactly least funny thing they could put into the chat to make me read out. Why is that in my, that's just a thought in my head, and it's not gonna escape now. Just a coalition of people trying to make me even less funny than I already am, which, joke's on you, you're never gonna pull that off. Anyway, that's all I got for this video. I hope you guys have a great one. I'm gonna fucking go play Pokemon Legends Arceus while this renders. Because I still haven't got myself a fucking Basculegion yet, and I need my Basculegion. Also, support Blue Stripe Shiny Basculin versus Greed and Full Metal Alchemist, everyone. Goodbye.
Done, huh?